Welcome back to 8 Spotlight, the podcast where we go founder by founder, startup by startup, to highlight the incredible builders in 8 Capital's 200 plus company portfolio. I'm your host, Samantha, and today we're joined by Yujian Yao, the co founder and CEO of Floot, a platform that's making it easier than ever for entrepreneurs and non coders to build full fledged apps with AI. Flute is part of the Y Combinator family and is empowering a new generation of founders to bring their ideas to life without needing to write a single line of code. What makes them even more impressive is that they started the batch with only 5 users and ended up with around 500. With over 670 paying customers, 66K in monthly revenue, and a growing community of creators, Flute is helping anyone from solar founders to startups build the next great product. In this episode, we'll dive into Yuji's journey, how Flute is redefining software creation, and what it really means to democratize app building in the age of AI. Okay, Yuj, take us back to the beginning. What sparked the idea for Flute?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. When I look back, really, Flute was a small experiment that I was just curious about code models. And was like, oh, it looks like something interesting. Maybe I can build like a design system creator with it. And I know a bunch of founder type friends that could be interested. So I built like a small prototype, try to get these people to use it. And obviously nobody wants to use it. I was like, okay, whatever, I'm going to launch it on Reddit. But what's really interesting to me was that, even though this was like, oh, you can create random like components and stuff, and it was really limited. A lot of the people on Reddit was really excited, and they use it to create in a very hacky way, like websites. Someone created like an e-commerce site. They like created these like apps, and they're all like super non-technical. And then they asked me like, right, this looks cool. Like, how do I connect it to database? Like, how do I make it real? So that gives me the impression, like the inspiration, like, really we should just go all the way in. Like, AI is good enough. It's not just for building a small part of your stack. You should be building the whole thing, and it should be able to work for anyone, like even the ones that doesn't write code. Because I look at the stuff that these people are building on a very crappy MVP, and it was already pretty impressive. So that's kind of, as we're going from there, I was like, all right, let's just like double down on that and build the right product for these people.
You've built a company designed to empower non technical founders. Did you experience firsthand how hard it can be to bring an idea to life without code?
Yeah. So, well, personally, I write code myself. I think when I talk to these users, seeing the excitement that they have, because some of them actually already also use other tools before. So it's not like completely new to them. But even then, they were like, oh, I tried this other thing. It's like so hard to do the thing I want. For some reason, this thing just works so much better. Seeing the kind of excitement and like, I think getting more into it when we talk to them more. I think one of the users that I still remember today was like, I tried out all of these tools and we have taken me a whole month to get something like this working. I was able to do it in a couple of days. And that was pretty exciting to them. So I think the demand for that is huge just because like the world before this is very different.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What was the earliest version of Flute like? And what were some key lessons from those first users?
The UI was very different. Again, it started out as a design system thing. Some of those things doesn't quite make sense. And it was more focused on like giving you a like very fine grained control on like, oh, you can actually dive into all of these small components and whatnot. But turns out people don't care. Like I think for a builder, what I care about is being able to see something getting built, and being able to somewhat know what's going on. So our AI actually outputs a lot of information when you finish building, just like this is what I did and stuff. But the very early version was obviously pretty buggy. There's like a lot of issues with it. Back then, we're just like, let's just like do this for free to like collect some signals to see like if this is even interesting. Because we don't also like didn't want to incorporate right away and stuff. There's like a lot of this paperwork. But one thing that's very exciting back then was some people actually reach out like saying like, hey, actually, I want to pay for this. Like, I've been using this for so long. I feel bad about this like freeloading. That was like pretty exciting to us again. There's probably something there that we could invest more into. I was thinking after that, a lot of that was just like refinements. We tweaked the UI to be more focused on building and like showing them things they care about. Like if they want to look at the database, we have a database view. And then we kind of just hide the code view into like another thing. And people haven't really complained about that because they don't really need to look at all the components and stuff. Um, yeah, then I think a lot of one thing we didn't have early on was also we don't even record the chat history. It's all like in memory, and we ship that. Um, uh, and I think that the interesting thing about this work is like once you have done it, people thought to kind of think of it as like, of course you have it. They don't. They're like, oh, of course the chat is there. I want to refresh is there. They before that people just like complain that sometimes it's not there. But like the new users, they never know like, oh, this thing actually start off with like a bare bone thing. There's like no chat history, no database view, and now they just take everything for granted.
It is always a good sign, though, when people are like, hey, I feel bad. Maybe I should start paying for this. YC has seen a wave of no code and AI first startups. What makes Flute's approach different?
Yeah, so we taken something that's more fundamental. We don't obviously a lot of what we're building is still code, so it builds on top of the ecosystem that we have today. If you look at the way that people code, or the way the AI write code, a lot of that is based on existing developer tools. I think a lot of the companies probably use Next.js or like a simple React scaffold, and then they have some kind of stuff that runs in the backend that looks at the console outputs. Our approach is actually like, we have to design this whole thing for AI instead, because AI is the one writing most of the code. So we still use React, but we build a whole framework on top of it. We have a very opinionated way of like, this is how you write the backend code. This is how you write the front end code. This is how you should separate them. Um, and that gives us a like very refined grained control to the AI, optimize the prompt. And on top of that, all this code needs to be run somehow. So a lot of people, again, they use existing tools like Vite, or if you use Next.js, Next.js come with its own way of running code. We build our own way of running code. So we call it a runtime that turns this code into things that you see on the screen that gets run in the backend, for example. And again, that gives us a lot of control on like, this is like how the code should be run. We can detect when the code kind of references things. We can detect it when we want to like say when detect whether it's like calling use effect a lot. And we have all those metrics that we know, we understand, and we can convert that into things that the AI needs to know. So a lot of times there are like bugs that happens that's actually very hard for the AI to understand. I would say even it's even hard for like say a regular developer to understand. But we can turn that into like actionable prompts that the AI can then look at and like, oh, right, I need to look at this file. There's probably something wrong with there. So it build a really good debugging system. And that way, when you give a prompt, you can be confident that most of the time you should be able to get that done and not like leave you with something that's broken that you have to like go and figure out, which you probably can't if you are non-technical.
Yeah, that makes sense. Looking back, what was the most surprising or humbling moment since launching Flute?
Yeah, I think so we know we've been getting this size of early traction. Like, I talked about people saying they want to pay less, and there's like people coming in and saying like, oh, this is like so much better. I'm really excited. But it's like after our launch YC, we just see like a really exponential growth, and that was really surprising. Well, I mean, on the one hand, we're like, this thing's gonna work, but on the other hand, it's still really exciting to see like the number going up like that. Um, and then I think there's a lot of these learning moments too. Once we start seeing the scale, like there's like quite small issues early on. They were like, oh, that's quite not a big deal, whatever. But once you have a bigger scale, like those issues become more pressing. People actually like as you have more users, things that used to not matter becomes more important. You kind of have to fix that. So I remember when we did the launch, like our support tickets was like exploding. There's just so many things coming in. We're like, oh shit, like how are we gonna deal with all of these things? Yeah, I think that's like just like an interesting moment as a founder to like learn about like getting traction, validating it. But then you also kind of discover like now you have to go to the next level and there's like more work needs to be done.
For someone who's never heard of Flute before, how does it actually work?
So on the surface, it's very easy to use. Submit a prompt, the AI goes on and figures things out. Again, because we build like a lot of the custom scaffolds under the hood, so Floot is very powerful. So in order to do a thing, it can decide to go on and update the database. It can make some changes. You can then go and look at the console logs, and you can look at the console logs in both front end and back end, see whether things are working correctly. You can decide to write a simple script and run the test to make sure things works. You can also go online and search for things. But the cool thing is that all of those should be done automatically. It's like, oh, I want to build this app, and Fluid goes on and does this research, does like all of the fixing stuff, and then it gives you like something that you can start iterating on.
Cool. Who's using Flute today? Are they solo founders, early stage startups, or even small businesses?
Yeah, I would say that kind of covers it. Solo founders, a lot of side hustlers, people with a day job who are just, they have a dream, they want to build, and they're bored out of their job. There's a lot of them. And we also see a lot of small businesses that use Fluid to build their internal operations app. One example is this cleaning company from Texas that used this app to coordinate the cleaning operations between the clients and the cleaners. And there's some startups that reach out to that they're like building or rebuilding their thing, and they want to use Float to do it because it's just more efficient.
Nice. Who do you think it benefits the most, like out of those people that you just listed?
Yeah, I think it's hard to quantify that because they're all on different dimensions. So if you think about the solo founder, a lot of them used to be not even able to do those things. Like in order to do those things, they'd have to hire someone for 5 figures at least. And
Mm.
now they can do it with like, Float is actually pretty cheap to get started, $25. And obviously they have to spend more than that to do something that's substantial. But compare that to a 5 figure like developer contract, that's like a lot lower. So it's like turning the impossible into possible for them. For the business owners, I think there's some parallel there that they have to hire a dev to like build those things. So they probably just wouldn't have even done that. But once they do it, it's actually it delivers amazing value. So one of them, I think one of the users they use a bunch of tools and that cost them about 500 a month. So they just like build their own thing, which actually works better because they don't need all of these other bloating features. They have certain features that's very specific to them. And they can just cut down on that whole $500 spent. So there's like a more visible monetary impact on them. For startups, obviously, I think startups always want to move fast. So being able to like validate that quickly, that's very important for them. So I would say it's all, they all operate on different dimensions. And then there's also people who are just like having a lot of fun building things that again, they wouldn't have want to spend like 5 figures on that. So I think people all benefited in like different ways.
You recently gained about 120K impressions on LinkedIn. Is that correct? How important has building in public been for user growth?
Yeah, think it's still a learning process for me. Before during YC, we don't really have time to do those things. Just focusing on launching, building, and like try to like talk to the users we already have. So I just started doing that after we launch, after like the whole YC thing wraps up. So still learning about the impact and whatnot. What I have learned so far was that definitely helps with visibility. So there are people who found us on LinkedIn, but it also like the other interesting effect I didn't thought about was like it also helps with hiring. Like people saw this, really cool project that's like getting a lot of traction and they are like interested in working for us. So that's pretty cool. We got some investor inbound, which obviously we don't care right now at this point because we just finished our round. It's like interesting people just curious and they might turn into users later on. They might turn into like, other kinds of people later on. So I think it's being visible and like talk about things you're building is definitely useful.
Can you share a story of something incredible that someone has built on Flute?
Yeah. Well, there's quite a lot of different ones. Let's see which one's more interesting. Yeah. So we're going back to the business owner case. They use things like Airtable. I'm not very sure what the other stuff they use, but they use a bunch of different SaaS tools to like run their operations, and it costs them like $500 a month. And then this person discovered Floot somehow. It built out a quick prototype. Was pretty impressed, so then it invested into building it out more and was able to like basically consolidate all of the functionality into one single app. So just that is already better. Like you don't have to run like 3, 4 apps separately, try to like maybe you have that information duplicated across, maybe you have to sync them. Now you have just one single point of truth and you use that. And then obviously like you used to spend all of this money on separate sales tools. It costs like $500, but now you just need one single tool hosted on Floot, which costs way less. And they basically just like channel from all these other SaaS tools and they only use these two apps they are building now. And then another cool thing is that as they evolve, they can start adding more and more functionality to that app that they're using. And now they can all do this, without having to write code, like they without being like super technical about it. To me, that was like pretty cool. Like I guess it's like very tangible. It's something that's like it's basically it gives the vibe of like killing the last generation of SaaS because this is the future of people building things that they they use themselves, potentially sharing that with others. Because I can imagine other similar businesses can use this tool they're building. I think at some point we're going to build something like that that lets people share those things. And then you can customize things on top of those things. So like imagine this guy sharing it with their friend running a similar business who has a slightly different need. So then they'll just like copy that and they make some changes on top. And now they have their own SaaS tool that probably going to save them another $500. So I think that's incredible.
I love that idea of people building what they need on your platform instead of just having to like go to a million different products and pay for all of them. I also love the idea of letting them share it with other people.
Yeah, I think if you look at the current world of like developers or like technical people dominating everything, open source is a big thing that people likes to share. I think that is the future of open source in a way that you don't technically like reading, you're not reading the code. You're just allowing this code to be packaged, distributed, and tweaked. Um, which is similar to what the whole idea behind open source, but now it's actually impacting more people.
It's more idea based than code based.
Yeah.
So Flute just hit 66K in monthly revenue, up 10% month over month. Congratulations. What's been driving that growth?
So a lot of things like, I started doing a lot of this LinkedIn stuff to get visibility. There's like a lot of word of mouth going on. If you search on Floot, you can see a bunch of like Reddit posts. We didn't pay for any of those. They are just like our users writing about us. I think we powered that by having a referral program to encourage people to do that. But that's been useful, like getting more people to talk about us and like sharing the word. We've been doing some experiments here and there, pretty small so far. I don't think they're yielding big results yet. And then I think some of the users, they also went on there like other stuff. Like one of the users recently went to a conference in Minnesota and he just decided to give us a shout out and talk about how he used stuff on Flute, which gave us a bunch of users too. Yeah, so far it's been pretty organic, but we are going to spend more on marketing too.
I do think it's pretty promising, though, that most of your users have come so far from organic growth because it proves that people really want the product, and that they need it and it works well.
Yeah, I think it's a good validation, and we just need to pour more fuel to the fire to get it go high.
Well, speaking of more fuel to the fire, you've written that we can look forward to another major launch in November. What's coming that listeners should be excited about?
Yeah. So to be honest, a lot of the features are more or less released already. We're probably just going to have a good package of things. It already have a lot of details at this point. I would say that when we look back a few months, the product always feels like an MVP. Like when we started YC, it's like that's an MVP, and then we did a launch, like that's much better. But then when we look back to where we were when we did that initial launch, we're like, all right, that's an MVP. It's missing a lot of things because we learned a lot by having these more users coming in, fixing issues, and adding more features. I think it's you can expect something like that to happen again when we did the launch, where we look back to the YC version that we did. Like, wow, that's pretty MVP. There's just like a lot more. Flow will become a lot more capable and empowering a lot more serious apps.
So, you've mentioned previously that scalable channels are your next focus. What kind of channels are you experimenting with?
Yeah. So for us, it's pretty early. So it's like again like experiments. If you think about from first principles, like Flood is great, but nobody knows about it. So that's probably like the biggest problem we need to solve. And I think like a good channel is ads is a good channel. Going on social media is a good channel. Like I've been doing a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, but I think our Twitter has been pretty quiet. So we need to scale that. TikTok has been, if you're working on consumer apps or consumer prosumer, TikTok is basically a thing that you have to be on. So we're doing that. YouTube is an interesting case because for our app in particular, that takes more time to actually work on, like to use. YouTube or like YouTube tutorials, YouTubers talking about products. It's a great way to also to be discovered. So we want to do some of those things too. And I just like trying out on like more of these social media channels to see what kind of content people like on these different kind of platforms and what kind of brand identity we should develop and to get more eyeballs on it.
So, for people who are listening who want to get more involved, you're currently looking for a founding full stack engineer and a founding growth marketer. What kind of people are you hoping will join the Flute team, and how are you engineering early community in your startup?
a lot of that is basically scaling the things that two of us are already doing. So I think like any startups, we want people that are really scrappy and that's like really hardworking. Um, and I think they also need to be creative. The things we're building, both engineering wise or like growth wise, are new. Like we're building our own runtime system, our own framework. We're serving this user who are kind of like the developers, but they're not technical. So I think the way we think about like how to build things for them, how to talk to them, it needs to be. It's not the same as like what used to be easy to do by the traditional businesses. And I think being really user centric, like for our engineers, we expect them to spend at least 20% of the time doing support. Because that's one great way of discovering issues in a product and learning what people care about. For growth marketer, obviously they have to really want to talk to our users. But also I think like, for growth, I also want to find people who are creative because I think for like this kind of product, you really need to come up with ideas that can go viral. And you don't do that by just like doing one thing. There's probably like many different things you have to try and some of them are going to work and some of them won't. So I think being hardworking, really enjoy talking to users and creative is probably like the most important thing for us.
Well, your team's YouTube accounts were recently banned. That must have been a shock. How did that impact your momentum, and what have you learned from it? And why did that happen in the first place?
Yeah, I can go more into detail. So it's actually a long story. We were banned twice. We started so during YC, we did a YC launch. Obviously, we submit our video to YouTube and then use that. And then for some reason, when we added S to like YC S24 to channel name, it just got banned. I still don't know why that happened. So I was like, all right, let me spin up another account. So I spin up basically another separate account and I just upload the video and anywhere and then whatever. And then we kind of uploaded a couple other videos for like product launch and this other thing. But it's been pretty quiet so far. After a month or so, the other account got banned again for circumvention, which is legit because we did circumvent the first ban, but first ban it does make sense. So I think the impact is not too bad. It's more like a psychological impact. Like, all right, if we do this again and then we upload it, and obviously we're gonna upload a lot more stuff now because we're scaling that YouTube channel. Is it just gonna get banned in another month where we might have like tens of videos up there and then we have to review the whole thing? So that was pretty scary. So we tried to ask for help. And other than that, I think the other impact was just like there's a bunch of online portals and stuff that they press away from Product Hunt or like YC, and they have the video. Which now, if you accept for Floot and go to some of these pages, you see like the videos, which wasn't great. But I don't think that's like a huge impact for us, given where we are now. But yeah, so luckily we got some investors really help us, and we were able to get the first one unbanned, which we would want to use. And through this, one thing I did learn is YouTube support is non-existent. If you want to get support, you better get a premium account. So for any business accounts, definitely go get a premium account. That way you can at least get premium support if something like that happens. And maybe those support can help you. So it was very hard for us to get help because even the people that are investors, they were like, oh, this is really hard because this account has no premium. And there's like, a whole different key line that nobody looks at. Um, I'm pretty annoyed by that, but for more practical advice, it's like get premium support and definitely call upon your investors. Just another thing I learned. I was pleasantly surprised that I can actually get this sorted by calling on the investors. Which I mean, like everyone was like, oh, you can ask for help and stuff. But this was like a really pleasant surprise.
Well, I'm glad that that was the silver lining there. What keeps you motivated through those kind of setbacks?
Yeah, I think it's really focusing on the mission. Like there are two ways to look at it. So on one hand, looking at the users that really had a great time using the product, that they might have used something else before, maybe they haven't, but like it was just like impossible for them to do these kind of things, and they were just always very excited. From time to time, we see people reach out on support. They're not asking for support; they just want to say like, "Oh, this thing is so great." I'm like so happy about it. It's always great to like see like those kind of things. So I think those are always very motivating. The other way is just looking out more into the future where we think about the future we're building. Like if you think about like today's developer infrastructure powering a lot of these apps and websites out there, they're huge. But if you think about the number of people that's going to be building in the future, that's going to be even larger than what's possible today. And even if we take a reasonable slice of that, we will be like a legendary business. So that's always something that is always hugely motivating.
Yeah, that is a great motivator. How do you balance building new features with refining what already works?
Yeah. I think they are not always clearly delineated. Like, for example, we recently added web search to the agent, which you can think of it as a new feature. But at the same time, it is making something better. Like it's making our agent better. And our agent kind of already works. Sometimes it struggle with things that's like, it's not in its training sample. So it can't like deal with new APIs and stuff. Adding the web search just makes it better. So some of those and so on the one hand, it feels like a new feature, but on the other hand, it also like solve a lot of the user pain points and who don't even realize like the internet search here is the solution. So those, they're not always clearly delineated. The other way I look at it is think about like our goal here. Like I think as a startup, there's always a lot of competing priorities. For us is both growth and retention. So thinking about like what hypothetically or like, reasonably would move the needle in both dimensions. It gives us some signal like this is probably what we should be doing. And then planning things out like, all right, this feature probably makes sense, but maybe it makes sense as something to bundle with this other thing, which we can do later. And it's not urgent. That's another way of like thinking about like how to sequence things. But yeah, I think I would say that the best thing is always something that is doing both. Those things are like, let's just like ship this thing that improve growth and retention. That's like a new feature, but also makes the existing things better.
So you mentioned retention. Do you think that going through the requests that your using customers have already given you is most likely the best way to tackle that problem?
Yeah, so I think there's like from the first principles again is like understanding why they are churning, and that could be coming from these people who are telling me the reason. But there's always the risk of like you get feedback from a group of very vocal users and not like everyone else. So I think it's always good to collect as much signal as possible and then run experiments. One thing that we actually recently learned was that some of the users turn because they finished building their app. They're still hosting with us, but they are just like, oh, actually don't really need to pay. And they're right because we don't charge them for the hosting. So we're like, okay, let's just see if we tell these people like we're gonna take down your website now because hosting costs money and you need to pay for that. And on longer term, we will have a better hosting plan for sure, and that's something we want to work on. But like right now, we can run some tests to see whether these people are truly are just disappointed or they actually have a good experience and they just didn't see the need to pay. And that was again gives us a lot of signal. Like a lot of people actually reply and like they're saying they want to keep their thing, and then they just like re-upgrade again. Um, and then all of the feedbacks and support tickets always gives us signal too. Some of them, I think, sometimes things could be hard to already gauge. But a good thing about a startup again is there's so much thing you can do that like you can just like push some of these things later on. Like one of the feedback we saw was we have a pretty agentic AI that does a lot of things and self-corrects and stuff. And it's kind of addictive when you see it doing all of these actions. But some people also see that as like, oh, your AI is just like writing code over and over again, like wasting me all these credits. So it's kind of like an impression thing. We are honestly not quite sure like whether we should deal with this right now or not. So it's kind of the thing where we probably push it for like a bit later.
Okay. So we're in a world where AI is becoming the co-pilot for creation. What do you think the next wave of app building looks like?
Yeah. The way I want to think about it is since I work in tech companies before, think about like what do the executives do in those companies? They don't just like let you go and build this thing and don't talk about it ever. So I don't believe in this world of just give AI one prompt and come back to it in 3 hours and you have this like fully working app. I think it's always this feedback is always going to be very important, and being able to craft that based on where the technology is and based on what the user's persona and what they want. It's probably going to be the next step here of like, you do want to have some autonomy, more autonomy of like having the AI doing more stuff, being able to self test and stuff like that. But what is the right point of checking in of like showing your the creator like, is this what you want? Does this work in the way that you expect it? I think that's going to be very important because language is always ambiguous. You say a thing, the AI can understand it as something different that still makes sense, but you come out as a surprise if it takes off 3 hours to like make that thing really good and come back to you with something that's you totally didn't expect.
What would you say to someone who feels intimidated by AI or believes they're not technical enough to build something real?
Yeah. So I just go and try it out. Like maybe it's not gonna work out. Maybe it will. I do think that there are still some skills that you have to learn, even as a non-technical user who wants to build things. I don't think those are like technical skills. I don't think you need to like say like, oh, I understand JavaScript, I understand how hosting works in order to build something. I think the skill there actually is more on the communication skills. So being able to express what you want when something doesn't happen, being able to actually point out what's not working. Like, like if you build something, it doesn't work and you just go like, oh, this doesn't work. The AI will have a hard time trying to figure out what doesn't work, and you might go and fix something that's completely irrelevant. But then being able to be very specific and like, oh, I click on this button, which you should give me this dialogue that says this thing, but instead it shows me this other side panel, which makes no sense. That gives AI a very clear direction. Like, all right, I need to go and fix this thing. And and also like when you're building new features, saying just being able to express like, oh, I want to build this step-by-step guide. Step one is this, step two is that. Versus saying like, oh, I want to build this like workflow. And these are like all of the information, go figure out. Being able to communicate things more specifically, I think would always be useful. But I don't think those are technical skills. They are more of some call it prompting skills, but I think a lot of that also is like, imagine if you are working with another engineer today who's a human. You probably have to do the same thing too. You can't just tell them like this doesn't work. You want to you want to point them at like things that doesn't work so they can go and figure out how to fix that.
That's a really good point. In your mind, what's the difference between no code and AI first building?
Yeah, I said no code is very much like last generation. Obviously I worked at V2 before, so I'm familiar with like how those things were done. You kind of create this building blocks that's pre-built that gives you, that's also more guardrails and constraints and needs to somehow fit into a UI that you can edit, which if you look at those UI, they are also still very intimidating. You have like a whole form of like 20 input fields that you can customize. And those work well for people who are technical or more technical leaning for sure. But they have this limitation of both in the sense of like, there's like a higher learning curve, which is funny because obviously they are still better than when you have to write code. But they also have limitation on what they can do just because of like all these constraints you have to place on them. A lot of troubles having like a good layout system because you have to do all this drag and drop stuff. And it makes it hard to have like the kind of flexible, but also very complicated layouts that most of the modern webs use today. So for AI first, I think the flips the whole script of like, now you can express your more like in pure language what you want. And AIs are trained on like all of the best code out there that they can build something that's like really customizable. And there's really no like limits on what can be built. The limit might come from, say, a hosting platform, like what's available in the infrastructure, but not so much in like, oh, this buttons can become a circle. It has to be a square. Like, AI doesn't have these kind of constraints. You can make that happen if you want that. Um, I think that but on the other hand, the issue with AI though is that with this traditional no code, you have more control. Like you can go into the things that they give you, you can go there and you modify it and you know for sure it's modified. With AI, it becomes more of a thing of communicating your change. And can you do that in a way that makes it specific enough? So you kind of have to verify like that those are the things that you truly mean. And like the AI has done something like that. So I think that's like kind of a more AI kind of takes over more part of this is how things can be done part. Like your idea is not going to be like 100% concrete, like what you use with coding or no code, where you want to specify every single thing, which is some people might like that, but it's also like more tiring. With AI, you would just be like, these are the things, and then you can drill down on something that's very specific. But you don't try to like specify every single thing.
So, interacting with AI is the skill here. Fast forward 2 years. Where do you see Flute in the ecosystem of creators and startups?
Yeah. If you do this right, I think Floot should be a household name. It should be something that people think about if when they want to debut something new, either internally or externally. We want to see a bunch of ecosystem of apps of Floot that's shareable, remixable, that can be built upon by each other. Yeah, and I think we probably have a bigger team and a way bigger market share.
Finally, one more question for you. If every entrepreneur listening could walk away with one lesson, from your journey, what would it be?
I would say action provides information. So just launch, ship and launch this stuff. Don't wait. I think for me, when I started this project, I wasn't super confident in that design system app. It was just something that I thought was interesting. Um, and it didn't end up being that too. Like, I think just like launching it in different places and learning from what people respond to it gives me a very good signal on like what I need to do. And then even after that, when we're building the app, it wasn't like super clear like what is the right direction. But then having all these people testing it and then eventually buying it and stuff, that gives us a lot of signal on like what we need to do. So I would say just don't wait. If you have something you want to try, just try it. Worst case, nobody cares. But make noise about it and you could learn something from it.
Very cool. Okay, Yuj, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
What you and the team at Flute are building is changing what it means to be a founder, giving anyone, regardless of technical skill, the power to bring their vision to life. For listeners who want to learn more or even start building with Flute, head to flute.com and follow their journey on LinkedIn. And if you're a talented full stack engineer or growth marketer, Flute is hiring. Thanks for listening to 8 Spotlight. I'm Samantha with 8 Capital. And remember, every great startup starts with an idea. Flute is making it easier than ever to turn yours into reality.